So in July of 1934, the United States launched Ranger 7, which crash-landed on the lunar surface, but it did return the first close-up images of the moon. And then the Russians made another huge step, though, in their progress. In 1965, they did the first spacewalk, and so they had sent up their cosmonaut Alexei Leonov, and without telling anybody he was going to do this, they had him get out of the spacecraft and float around out there. And he was out there for about 10 to 12 minutes. But while he was out there, his spacesuit inflated in the vacuum of space. And that's a normal thing to happen, but of course they hadn't really thought that through, and so he wasn't finding he was able to fit back through the airlock back into the vessel. And so once the television coverage had ended for it, thankfully nobody was watching because he was pretty panic-stricken, but he had to bleed off some of the oxygen in order to get back in to the craft, and that was very dangerous because that's the oxygen he needed to breathe. So it was a very scary situation. His parents, thankfully, were not having to watch him go through that. They were already pretty stressed out when he got out of the craft because they didn't know he was going to do that either. So it was pretty tense, but their troubles were not over because when they went to re-enter Earth, they lost a part of their control system, and they ended up doing an emergency landing in Siberia, 2,000 miles off course. They ended up landing in a whole bunch of snow, and they were stuck there because it took a while before people could come and get them. But they survived. Meanwhile, in 1965, the United States was able to send a craft off to Mars and return some close-up images of the planet and complete a flyby of the planet, so we got a lot of good information there. At the same time, Russia was headed over to Venus, and their first craft that they sent over, Venera 3, crashed on the surface of Venus, but then 2 years later they sent Venera 4, and it was able to slowly descend through the atmosphere and return the first images of the planet itself. So both of the countries were getting closer to the moon. Russia in 1966 did a soft landing of a craft onto the surface of the moon, so they would be able to very gently set something down, which of course you got to be able to do if you're going to have people involved. Meanwhile, the United States had a setback, and I'm going to play you the news recording for what happened with our situation here.
Astronauts Roger Chaffee, Edward White, and Gus Grissom lose their lives in a tragic flash fire aboard their grounded space capsule. The tragedy occurred during a simulated countdown for the first flight of the Apollo program, whose goal is to put a man on the moon by 1970. Grissom and White were veterans of spaceflight, Chaffee a rookie. During a drill similar to this, the entire three-man crew was engulfed by flames. A blue-ribbon panel of space experts is investigating, aided by impounded NASA films and tape recording. Grissom was one of the 7 original astronauts. White was America's first spacewalker. Chaffee, never in space, had long experience as a jet test pilot. He was proud and happy that his first flight was to initiate the Apollo program. When the tragedy struck, one of the astronauts shouted, "Fire in the spacecraft!" In a few seconds, all 3 were victims of the swift inferno which left the capsule a blackened shell. One reporter said it looked like the inside of a furnace. Investigators theorize that perhaps a short circuit or electrical overload may have sparked the blaze. 27 would-be rescuers were all overcome by smoke and heat. Astronauts Chaffee, White, and Grissom, martyred heroes who gave their lives in total dedication to duty. Their memory will forever be honored.